full movie recap. The movie begins in the Philippines in 1999, where scientists discover the enormous remains of an ancient creature buried underground. Around the same time, strange seismic activity leads researchers to investigate a massive underground chamber. Inside, they discover evidence that something enormous had been alive there, and that it had recently escaped. The story then moves to Japan, where American nuclear plant engineer Joe Brody works at the Janjirith nuclear facility with his wife, Sandra. Their son, Ford, is still a child. Joe becomes increasingly concerned when unusual seismic activity begins affecting the plant. Joe believes the plant is experiencing something far more serious than an ordinary earthquake. Unfortunately, the facility is eventually forced to shut down after a catastrophic event. Sandra and several other workers become trapped inside the damaged reactor area. Joe is devastated when Sandra dies. Years later, Ford Brody is serving in the U.S. Navy and has started a family of his own. His father, however, has never accepted the official explanation for the disaster. Joe remains convinced that the nuclear accident was caused by something unusual and continues investigating the abandoned area. Ford returns to Japan to help his father deal with the situation. Together, they discover that the supposedly destroyed nuclear facility is actually being used to contain a gigantic organism. The creature is eventually revealed to be a massive prehistoric predator known as a Muto, a massive, unidentified terrestrial organism. The Muto has survived by feeding on radiation. It has been kept hidden because the scientists fear what would happen if it escaped. Scientists realize that there is another enormous creature connected to it. This creature is something humanity has encountered before in ancient history. That creature is Godzilla. Godzilla is presented not simply as a monster attacking humanity, but as an ancient apex predator whose existence is connected to the natural balance of the planet. He has apparently survived for millions of years by remaining hidden beneath the oceans. Scientists realize that the Muto is essentially a threat that Godzilla is naturally drawn toward. The first major confrontation occurs in Hawaii. A Muto attacks a military installation and causes enormous destruction. As panic spreads, Godzilla emerges from the ocean. The military initially believes Godzilla himself is the primary threat. However, the scientists begin to understand that Godzilla is actually pursuing the Muto. Godzilla and the Muto briefly confront each other, but the battle does not immediately end. The Muto manages to escape, leaving Godzilla to disappear back into the ocean. Meanwhile, Ford becomes increasingly caught in the middle of the disaster. As the military attempts to understand the creatures, another shocking discovery is made. There is not just one Muto. There is a male Muto and a much larger female Muto. The two creatures are attempting to find each other so they can reproduce. This creates an even bigger threat. If the Mutos successfully reproduce, their offspring could potentially spread across the planet. The female Muto eventually attacks Las Vegas and other locations while the male continues moving towards mate. Eventually, the creatures converge in San Francisco. The city becomes the center of the battle. The military launches a massive operation to stop the Mutos. Their plan involves using nuclear weapons, believing that conventional weapons may not be powerful enough to destroy the creatures. However, the nuclear weapons create another danger. The Mutos are attracted to nuclear radiation, meaning the attempt to destroy them could actually give them additional energy. The female Muto attacks Godzilla while the male Muto assists her. Godzilla struggles against the two creatures but continues fighting. The male Muto is killed. The female Muto remains alive and attacks Godzilla again. Godzilla kills the female Muto using his iconic atomic breath, blasting the creature at close range. With both Mutos dead, the immediate threat is finally over. However, Godzilla is severely exhausted from the battle. He collapses. For a moment, everyone believes the legendary creature may have died. Ford and the survivors begin escaping the devastated city. Then Godzilla suddenly gets back up. He lets out a massive roar before returning toward the ocean. The humans watch as Godzilla disappears into the distance. The news media begins referring to him as the king of the monsters. The movie ends with Godzilla returning to the sea, leaving humanity behind, rather than conquering the world or deliberately destroying civilization. Godzilla has essentially fulfilled the role of an ancient force of nature. He appeared because another species threatened the natural order, fought the Mutos, and then disappeared once the threat was eliminated. Ending explained. The important idea behind the ending is that Godzilla is not the true villain of the movie. The Mutos are the immediate threat because they're trying to reproduce and could potentially create a new population of radioactive creatures. Godzilla acts as a natural counterbalance to them. This is why the movie portrays Godzilla more like an ancient predator than a traditional villain. Humanity initially sees him as another gigantic monster, but the scientists eventually realize that he has his own role within the planet's ecosystem. The final scene reinforces this idea. After defeating the Mutos, Godzilla does not remain in San Francisco or attack humanity. Instead, he simply returns to the ocean. The destruction caused by the battle is enormous, but Godzilla's objective was never to conquer mankind. He was there to restore the balance. And after the threat was eliminated, the king of the monsters disappeared once again.